Good evening. I'm James Exum. My presentation this evening will be on the subject of Brahman, creator of the universe, creator of the cosmos. This will be an introduction to Brahman, and it's part of my journey through the heart of yoga philosophy. The ideas and words spoken within this video are taken from chapter 3 of the book I wrote a while back called Atman, the Soul of Yoga. This is chapter 3 is Brahman. Chapter 1 is Asana, the poses of yoga. Chapter 2 is Atman, which is the soul, the human soul, while it's in the human body, Atman. This is chapter 3, Brahman. I was going to do a follow-up from my last video on karma, but I've been working on this discourse for quite a while. It's taken quite a bit of my time and effort and energies to put it together. And today I said, well, what I spoke of in that last video on karma is rather inclusive. Anyone that wants to rewind or go into the text of it are welcome to do so and follow up on their own. I think I put out enough data on that. So I'm going to move on to chapter 3, which is Brahman. Moksha would be later in the book, but for some reason I jumped ahead and went ahead and did my video on karma. I thought it was important when I was doing it, and I still think it's important. But back to the introduction. In the journey through the heart of yoga philosophy, this will be chapter 3 of my book, as I said. And yoga philosophy stands as a luminous guidepost. I'm reading from my notes. I printed these out today. As a luminous guidepost, inviting the seeker to contemplate the deepest essence of being a human, of being on this earth, dealing with the problems of this earth, trying to find your way through life on this earth to a positive ending. Yes, that is right. So before delving into the subtleties of Brahman and the profound wisdom of the Upanishads are the writings that follow the Vedas. I've mentioned them several times before. You're welcome to look them up. I won't go into any deep explanation right now, but most of the information that's retained within this chapter comes, the source of much of this information I took from the Upanishads, giving credit where credit was due. So it's essential to set the stage for understanding the intimate relationship between Atman, the soul, the individual soul, and Brahman, the universal reality, the creator, the one without a second. The ancient discourses that are found in the Upanishads were not only metaphysical and foundational on the subject of yoga, but also they were the transformative potential awakening within each practitioner. They may well have transformed an awakening into the heart and mind of the practitioners. So now I'm going to an overview on the chapters focused on Brahman. This section highlights the exploration of Brahma as presented in the Upanishads, as I mentioned. I'll quit reading here in a moment and start teaching, so to speak. They'll be addressing the important subject of, and in going into this deeper, I will be addressing the important subject of our innermost nature. Through the teachings in Atman, the Soul of Yoga, which is the title of the book, We are guided to reflect on the unity of Atman and Brahma and how this unity underpins the practice and the philosophy of yoga. I am a yogic philosopher. I have spent 52 years studying, practicing, writing papers, writing monotypes, writing even a couple of books. So let's move on in this introduction. Now what I'm going to do for you. This video is an introductory video, and being that that is what it is, I'm going to go ahead and break it down for you. What I intend to cover probably during a series of definitely more than 1 or 2 videos, maybe up to 4 and possibly up to 6. And when I was thinking of this today, I said, am I going to say to my viewers and to those that are learning the philosophy of yoga, which is the subtitle of this work, of my work on YouTube, am I going to say to them it might take 6 videos? And then I thought again, I said, well, you know, my history of yoga took 4 videos, and it was rather inclusive and informative, I hope. I believe it to be. I put a lot of work and a lot of research into that. But when you start thinking of Brahman, who is our creator, when you start thinking in other religions, they call him God Almighty. Well, Brahman is the Creator Almighty. Without Brahman, this discussion would not be going on between you and I. That's not a discussion, but this discourse would not be occurring. I would not be writing it through this video to your listening ears and to your receptive mind. The world would not be here. The cosmos would not be here. So if it takes 6, excuse me for laughing, but in a way I see the irony of worrying about how many videos it's going to take to cover the subject of Brahman, the creator. What does it matter as long as I give you informative, scholarly insight into the reality of how the Upanishads and how yoga philosophy sees and explains our Creator to my listeners and to all of those that are already into yoga, aspirants of yoga, aspiring students of yoga, and hopefully, if you do or if you do not, followers of my videos, that would be great. I have 2 or 3 now that have signed on, I think, and I appreciate those. I did not ask for them. As I said in my very first videos, I'm not seeking anything except to spread the word. So let me get back to this introduction to Brahman. I'll break it down into the subcategories that will be spoken about and explained pretty much in detail in each video. The first video, the second video, this is the first, this is the introductory. The second video, well, let me finish saying what I intend to say in this video. This is the introduction to Brahman. It will include an overview of the chapters focused on Brahman, declaration, descriptive phrases, and names of the Creator. I've already called him the Eternal One, the Unborn One, the Undying One, one without a second, the one without attributes. There's many, many names in the Vedic writings and in the Upanishadic texts naming the Creator, Brahman, by various names and appellations, not appellations, names. And what we must remember, and why I will be dedicating so many videos to this subject, I'll dedicate only as many as necessary. I won't go overboard. I try not to go overboard. But we must remember his uniqueness, I speak of him as his, but he's also known in a scholarly way as it. He's the third pronoun, not he, she, but it. It created everything. It is our. We are everything in the cosmos. It has been manifested from it. It's not a slang. It's not putting him down or her down. It's just the ancient way of referring to the Creator, to Brahman, as it. There's no slang. Actually, to me, by calling the Creator it, I am showing historical reverence to my Creator with sincerity from my mind and my heart and my soul. So that's what's happening in this first video. In the second one, I've titled it, these are all working titles. I've titled it so far, Paradox of Brahman's Existence. Well, that title, I am a philosopher and I am a Vedic scholar, so I will be using terminology that goes along with what I have learned and how I speak. This is the way I speak. This is not pretentious. This is the way I write. I could go with the common language, but that's not my style. Not that I have any incredible style, but it just, when in Rome, you do as the Romans. So the paradox of Brahman's existence will include about 3 major points. The first one being, of course, that Brahman, as I mentioned a second ago, Brahman is eternal. And here's where the paradox comes in. He's existing, while at the same time, he is non-existing. Well, we'll get into that one later. That's just a statement I just made that I will follow up with the proper information and the proper proofs, P-R-O-O-F-S. The second one, the second point in the second video, Paradox of Brahman's Existence, I will furnish you with references to the Upanishads dealing with the manifested and non-manifested states of Brahman. That follows the first one I just mentioned, existing and non-existing, manifested and non-manifested states. Again, this is philosophy. If you feel uncomfortable, you don't have to go on with these videos. You're welcome to join any of them and listen to them as long as you like, rewind them, do your own research on the subjects I touch on and go into depth within the videos. That's up to you. There's no tests, there's no finals, there's no pop quizzes. This is just me imparting the knowledge I've gained over the last 52 years of being a student of yogic philosophy that I am now giving to the world before I leave this earth. I'm now sharing my 52 years of research and writings and so forth. The third point in this paradox of Brahman's existence, which will be the second video, is the distinction between these states of being. I just said there will be references to the Upanishads or from the Upanishads dealing with the manifested and non-manifested states of the existence of Brahman or non-existence of Brahman. The third point, I will point out and explain the distinction between these states of being. In other words, I've already mentioned them. I've spoken of how I will talk about them. In the third point, I will put it all together for the viewer, for the student, for the person aspiring to elevate themselves within the field of yoga philosophy. Well, that's a little heavy, so we might want to lighten it up by me just saying, telling you a couple of personal things. I started the study of yoga when I was 23, just gotten out of the Air Force, living here in Austin, Texas. I lived on West Avenue in those days, which is to the west of town, obviously. The original West Avenue was the west side of town, the furthest west street of the old downtown Austin. I've lived here since March the 11th, I believe is right, of 1970. I came here straight from medical training, left basic training in the Air Force, medical training, came to Austin to Bergstrom Air Force Base, which is now Bergstrom International Airport. I have lived in Austin ever since. When I got out of the Air Force in November 19th of 73, that date I know exactly, I said, well, both my parents passed while I was here. I was 23 years old. My family had scattered all over the world, my brothers and sisters. So I said, well, there's no saying you can never go home again. Well, my parents chose the cities that I was raised in and lived in. And for the first time in my life, I was free to choose the city that I would make my home, which became Austin and still is. One of my other choices I made in my life was I was raised as a Southern Baptist in southwestern Georgia by my parents. I mentioned in one of my other videos, you generally grow up into the religion of your parents and the politics of your parents and the social etiquettes of your parents. And I was looking for my own philosophy, not necessarily a religion, but a philosophy of life with which I could be comfortable. And in doing so, by studying, bumping into yoga, studying it, even teaching the physical poses and positions and exercises at first, and then drifting later into the mental side of it. That's the physical side, the mental side of it, which is the philosophical side of it, and staying with it and going deeper and deeper and researching more and more every year up to today. I'm still researching. I found yoga. I found my philosophy of life. I found nothing I could argue with in yoga except some of the mythology of the Hindu side of yoga when they lean more towards the religious as opposed to the philosophical. But I'm not saying anything against that. I'm just saying I chose out of yoga philosophy and history what fits best with my personal choices of how to live and how to be and the moral and ethical standards. And it just fits me like a glove. And I'm here to tell you about it today. The third video will cover the narrative of creation. Oh my, what a wonderful, it's just, I'm ecstatic when I think about this. When I found the narrative of creation within Upanishads and the great texts of yoga philosophy, when I bumped into that, when I ran into that, when the breath was taken out of my body, the first time I read about that and how the conception of creation was put into words and into writing by the early yogis. I'm a yogi. A yogi is simply a man that is deep into the philosophy of yoga, deep into the learning of yoga, deep into even writing and teaching about yoga. He's nothing special. He's just, that's his title. And it's not really even a title. It's just a way of expressing that gentleman is a yogi. So in the narrative of creation, the first point that I'll discuss, and this is in the third video, will be Brahman as the ultimate cause and source of the universe. Well, if we're talking about creation, you've got to have a creator. And that's what that first point talks about, Brahman as the ultimate cause and source of the universe. Well, if it was the only thing about, and there was no cosmos, there was no Earth, and there were no whirling galaxies, and there was no northern star and southern cross and moons and meteors and elements and atoms and protons, and if none of that existed, if it was just it, Brahman, then he had to be the ultimate cause, and he had to be the source from which the universe was manifested. And this will come out in that third. It's very exciting to me. It's one of the most exciting parts of the history of yoga philosophy. This will come out in that narrative concerning creation. The third video. I can't wipe this smile off my face. I'm sorry. It's not ecstasy, it's just enthusiasm. I get very enthusiastic when I talk about this subject. So the projection of self into the universe without lessening himself. In other words, he projected the universe from himself. The Hebrew Bible says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. This is the book of John. And the Word was God. The same was in the beginning without God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. It says those words. In other words, the Word, he spoke the Word, and the cosmos came into being. That's the Hebrew version of the creation. I will teach strictly on the narrative of creation from the yogic philosophical vantage point. You will notice occasionally in my videos that I will quote other religions. Yoga is not a religion. Yoga is a science. It's a science of life and how to live life. But you'll notice in some of my videos, I will quote other religious sources. I'll quote, say, from the Greeks, or I'll quote from the Romans, I'll quote from the Hebrews, I'll quote from the Oriental sources, the Chinese, the Hindus, of course. I consider that part of, I'm integrating truths no matter which source they come from, no matter which religion they sprang from. And sometimes you will see them repeated in other philosophies of religion, or in the case of yoga, just the philosophy of yoga itself as a science. And when I first would see these, I do comparative studies between the religions, and that's how I came into my research and how I came to be a yogi. But when I would first bump into these, I would go, oh, just being naive and just being a plain old human being, I'd say, wow, those rascals, they took that. Later on, they came along and came up with their writings. They took that from yoga. Well, I'm not trying to be mean here, I'm just trying to be truthful. But when I would do that, because I was so naive, I was actually in my impure thoughts, and I do have impure thoughts just like everyone else. I'm a human being. I thought, well, I'll go ahead and say it. Well, they nicked that, they stole that. But then as I matured and as I settled down, and I became a bit more mellow, hopefully I'm a mellow fellow, I realized they did not steal, they did not purloin, they did not take without asking, they just simply borrowed something from the yogic wisdom that they had seen in their own people's existence. You reap what you sow. That's karma. What goes around comes around. That's karma. In karma, it's action-reaction. Whatever you do has a consequence. That's part of karma, yogic philosophy. But they're not stealing. These are common ideas that have great significance that were discovered independently by the philosophies of the major religions of the world and the major sciences that have evolved out up to this point in time of the world. Well, that's enough of my philosophy. So the projection of self into the universe without decreasing himself. Brahman cannot be increased nor decreased. This is one of his attributes. You'll learn more about the subjects of attributes and how it deals with Brahman and other areas of yoga philosophy as you go through my videos and as I explain it here and there. The next point will be the cosmic dream, which is Maya, and how Maya manifests the manifestation of the universe through the power of Maya. Maya is an illusion. Maya is the curtain. Sometimes Maya is the hidden power. It hides the face of God. It hides the mechanics behind the scenes. But Maya will be a video unto itself. The next point is inclusion of all, from galaxies to storms, in the Creator's dream. In other words, if we are within the dream of Brahman, if this is all a dream, Poe said in one of his poems, "Take this kiss upon the brow, and in parting from you now, let me this one thing avow." And he's talking about dreams. He's talking about dreams in that poem. So the inclusion from galaxies to atoms, in other words, from super cosmic entities down to the foundational points that make up everything, the foundational roots of everything, atoms and subatoms and subatomic, and on it goes down. Okay, principle. The main point that gives standing to the narrative of creation in yoga philosophy will be the principle that nothing can come from nothing. And that has to be true. If you have a zero and you want to, in a mathematical equation, 0 equals, and you want to go to the other side and it says it equals 6,742, well, your professor, your teacher, your high school teacher, your first grade teacher, third grade teacher, whoever starts you on math, will say, no, you got the answer to that one wrong, that equation wrong. 0 equals 0. So nothing can come from nothing. So the cosmos had to come from something. Other sayings about this as it's the big finger. If you have a series of dominoes and they're set up to fall against each other, and a chain reaction occurs because of that first domino falling into the next one, and so on, and creates that wonderful symphony, progressive falling until it reaches a certain point where it terminates. You have to have that finger to push, or something that represents that finger, or has to power that finger, to push that first domino. There has to be a starter. The big finger, it's called. I don't know if that theory is still around or that talk is still around. It was 20, 30 years ago. Nothing can come from nothing. And then, I believe the last point, in video 3, will cover, yes it is, will cover the cycle of creation, preservation, and dissolution. Now, in yoga philosophy, there are gods that I accept, not all the Hindi gods, the mythology, but I do accept the fact that there's a creator, there's a preserver, and there's a destroyer. The creator is Brahman, the preserver is Vishnu, the destroyer is Siva. Siva. So we'll go into each one of these deeper. I'm probably going way too deep into it, just as an introduction. But I wanted to give you insight on where I'm going with this. The next one will be, now we spoke of Maya just a moment ago. The next one will be, number 4 will be Maya and the perception of Brahma. And I'll just go through these a little faster now. The perception of Brahma through Maya's illusion. Okay, we'll talk about that in depth later. Misapprehension of the non-dual Lord as individual material components. We'll talk about that in depth. This is philosophy now. This is not your average video where you're sitting around talking about some guy over in India sitting on a leopard skin contemplating his navel. This is, or someone in a asana physical yoga class standing on their heads in the corner. You know, I always say you can get further in life walking around on your feet than you can standing on your head. I'm not making fun of anyone's classes, exercise, or philosophy. I'm just giving you my personal viewpoint about these things. Okay. So Brahma's sovereignty over all causes, time, self, and more. Well, of course, if he's God, he is the sovereign of everything lower than himself. Nothing higher than Brahman, nothing equal to Brahman. So of course he's over all causes, he's over time, he's over self and more. That'll be explained in detail later. And then the last one point that will be covered in the 4th video will be the sage's realization of Brahman through yoga, self-control, and meditation. Well, I've come to my own realization of Brahman through those techniques. The study of yoga, self-control, meditation, research. It doesn't mention research. I might throw that in there later. Now let's move on to what will become video number 5. Cosmology from given Upanishads, and I will be quoting in number 5 a very specific Upanishad. It's called the Svetasavatara Upanishad, Svetasvatara Upanishad. And this will cover, point 1 of that will cover creation, preservation, and dissolution as acts of Brahman. You see, even though the Hindus have the 3 gods, they're called the Trimurti, Trimurti, Trimurti as those 3 gods: creation, preservation, dissolution, destruction. The fates actually hold the same position. It's not fate, it's fates. And the 3 fates, plural, are Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos. This is a different religion, this is a different culture, this is a different world. But you see, I do this comparative research, which has made me into the yogi I am today and the writer I am today. And I will call myself an authority, I will not call myself an expert, on the subject of yoga philosophy and comparative philosophy between the different religions and such. So you see, Clotho is the creator in the fates. Lachesis is the preserver in the fates. Atropos, and this is where we get the word atrophy in medicine, Atropos is the destroyer, or the one that brings about dissolution, which is Shiva in yogic philosophy. So you see how I integrate. And if you pay attention and rewind and take notes and do your own research, you will find that I'm a fountainhead. This is not brag, this is just fact. I'm a fountainhead when it comes to comparative mythology and comparative data amongst the different religions and philosophies of religions of the world. And this is what I intend to leave as my gift to the world before I leave this world. Number 6, Brahman as material and efficient cause. There's 3 points to this one, and some of them might turn out to be very controversial in your minds, but again, this is my viewpoint, and this is what I am teaching. Brahman is both the substance and the creator of the universe. That's mentioned once before, but then it goes deeper. And I use the analogy of a spider weaving a web from its own silk. I said he cannot be diminished by manifesting the cosmos. Well, a spider is not diminished from weaving a web, i.e., cosmos, from its own silk. It's merely manifesting the web from its own body. That's the manifestation of the cosmos from Brahman, using that as an analogy. Unity of material and creative agency in Brahman. We'll go into that. That's a little deeper. That will be explained in full for you. And that will be video number 6. And finally, we're coming to the conclusion of this first video. And finally, I will give you the conclusion, the wrap up, the summary, putting it all together for you in the last video. So the summary of Brahman's nature and cosmic function will be mentioned. That's the first point in the last video. And the second point, and there's only 2, usually there's 3 or 4 or 5 in these, but in this one, the conclusion should be short and sweet. The second one will be implications of Maya and the gunas for existence and perception. Well, you go, well, you talked about Mayas, but what is this, the gunas, G-U-N-A-S. Some people pronounce it gunas, for existence and perception. Well, that will become another video, and probably the one following this particular video on Brahman, even though it's not alphabetically in line with the chapters I created. There's 18 chapters in that book, Atman, the Soul of Yoga. Each one of them is alphabetically in order to the end of the book. The gunas are a subchapter in this book, or chapter 3, titled Brahman. So that's why that will come about as part of this. And again, I'll go into the detail of that. So if this has interested you at all, and it, after almost 40 minutes, it's either bored you to death or caught your attention to some degree, again, rewind, hear what I say again, look at the device that allows you to follow my words with them being written on the screen, closed caption. I finally figured out what it's called. It's called closed caption. And do your own research. And so I'm going to close with this, but this is the introduction. And the rest of it, I assure you, because I'm not going through point by point, should not be nearly as non-entertaining as this has been. This has been an outline. If you're going to do a class, a college course, you get an outline of what's coming at you, or should, if it's a good teacher, professor, doctor, just giving the discourses. I'm none of those. I'm just simply an old yogi that's imparting my wisdom to you as my listener and my visitors to my videos. So I'm going to go ahead and close, and thank you so much for being so patient to listen to all of this. And as I say, be good to yourself, be good to each other, and pass that information on to family, friends, or strangers about being good to yourself and others. And who knows, someday, 10 years from now, we may all wake up and say, oh, what a wonderful world we're in. Good night, and thank you.